which is what Duncan said at the moment, but I'll let you, Duncan, do the introductions.
Will do.
Once you've got that up and running.
Okay. There we go.
Fantastic.
Well. Okay, so thanks everyone for coming along. As Laura's just explained, we're going to be live streaming the event on YouTube for the first part of the session. So if I get a bit distracted here, because it's about 10 seconds behind on my computer there, so it's a little bit distracted. So the first half, we're going to have this sort of public meeting where Laura's going to explain about the project, and then we're going to have a quick Q&A session after that. Point, Alistair. So at the end, we've got this Q&A session. We're going to keep streaming for the Q&A. So if anyone doesn't feel comfortable asking any questions that are going to be live over the broadcast here, then feel free to catch us afterwards to ask them privately. That's all okay. So the second half, we're going to turn YouTube off. What we're going to have then is more of a, you guys do the work, a bit of a workshop, feeding in ideas. So if you're more interested in just the information side of things, then feel free to scuttle off for that second half. No, you don't have to stay for that. But it'd be great if as many people could stay and get their ideas forward for that workshop after the first half. And for that, we're going to set up a Skype call, and anyone that wants to participate remotely from that will call in via Skype and get their input onto it. So Laura, I'm going to hand over to now. She's going to start her presentation, and while it's going, I'm going to hand around a list of just for names and emails and organisations, so I can get you on the information list and keep you up to date with all the information about the project. Okay, hand over to Laura.
Remarkably efficient.
Good.
So I'm just going to run through. Hopefully, if I stand here, then the people online will be able to see us. Who's online at the moment, by the way? Just so we kind of know. So you kind of know who might be mysteriously kind of silent, kind of watching. I always like to try and include people.
Got one person watching, it says.
So, okay, so I think that might be Nick Tate, possibly.
Possibly, yeah.
Possibly. Okay, so then we do have kind of silent participation there. What I wanted to just do is spend about 15 minutes outlining what this is all about and why we kind of like asked you to kind of come together, and what we're hoping to achieve, and why we kind of think this might actually, this isn't a project which is about trying to do something that benefits us. It's trying to get people together, do something that benefits you guys, right? That's the kind of the idea behind it. The coordinators for the project to get us going in the first year, myself, those of you, I hopefully introduced myself, I think most of you as you walked in the door. My name's Laura Watts. I'm actually at the IT University of Copenhagen in Denmark, which seems like a long way away, but I've actually been backwards and forwards working in Orkney for about 10 years. So some of you already know over that time, doing kind of research. I'm actually, I'm an ethnographer, kind of anthropologist, and I focus on futures and technology. So I'm interested in how the future gets made. And I think Orkney is an incredibly interesting place because it's on the edge, but the futures here are far in advance often of a lot of other places. And I think that's one of the reasons it makes it really exciting. So I go around the world going, come to Orkney, there's cool stuff happening here, because there really is. The other coordinators, when we put this project together, is I asked Duncan at Aquaterra to help, and I think many of you already know Duncan Clark here at Aquaterra. And we're also funded by Mozilla. You'll see in the bottom corner, Mozilla is a non-profit organisation. You may know them because they fund the Firefox browser. And they're not for profit because they're a community supporting, they're all about open internet access. So that's one of the reasons they're interested in what we're trying to do, because they're kind of thinking very much about, they're interested in edge places like Orkney and how they can support and learn from what's going on in Orkney. So that's one of the reasons we got Mozilla funding. We think that's quite a good fit for this. So let me actually tell you what this actually is. No, it's on. So I'm going to give a bit of background because we've got a mix of people here. I know some people who kind of like, know what the cloud is and can say something in their sleep. However, I'm also just going to start from a kind of basic level to introduce the project, because I've also got people here who the cloud is a little bit something that's less familiar. So I'm starting with this phrase, the cloud, and I'm using a quote from Mark Anderson called software is eating the world, which was his idea, because over the last few years, we've reached this really interesting situation whereby we are making data all the time. And many organizations, companies and individuals are essentially becoming software companies and organizations, or data companies and organizations. We're sharing data via Dropbox, via Flickr, or on YouTube. We've got applications where we're sharing data, Google Docs. We're also making loads of data. I know we've got some people who are involved in the community trusts here. All the wind turbines are making data and moving data around. Cars have processors in them, and these days are on, kind of looking about how we're moving data from cars. Smart meters in homes, the idea of the smart grid, that's essentially all about moving data. And we also have people, I know some of you here do remote working. I certainly do. I spend an awful lot of my time working remotely, and that's essentially all kind of about moving data. And usually we talk about the data moving via the cloud. And the cloud being this kind of like this supposedly kind of remote virtual set of servers or place where the data moves around in the world. What's interesting about the fact is that, as many of you here know, the cloud is not this fluffy, nowhere virtual thing. It's very, very, very material. So although when we're moving data, if you're on Netflix or Google or YouTube, you don't really know where your data is, and neither do you care. However, the data, and many people do care about it, particularly the data industry, because although the cloud is talked about as being virtual, apologies for those of you who this is familiar, and you can kind of correct me if I'm getting this wrong in my brief high-level view. The important thing about the cloud is the fact that cloud basically is something that's physical. This is a photograph of the Google data center in Finland. I'm in Denmark, living in Denmark at the moment. There's a whole load of massive data centers that Apple and Facebook are putting in. There's a huge one in Sweden, in Luleå. This is where your data goes. When you're basically typing stuff into Google, it goes to big buildings like this. The other interesting thing, of course, as soon as you look at that, or at least I do, I go energy. All right, the amount of the data industry is an energy industry. The thing that they're all obsessed about, Google, Apple, Facebook, all of them, is how much carbon footprint they have and the energy they use. Because every time you type a letter into Google, it basically, it's an energy cost. The carbon footprint of the ICT industry is estimated to be about the same as the aviation industry, which is one of those you kind of go, ooh. And the reason I'm highlighting this is to do with the fact as reminders that data has a physical place. And it's not something we often think about. However, when I say we don't often think about it, if you're in Orkney, and I know this because I was at the Digital Forum on Saturday, my experience is that here in Orkney, we tend to think quite a lot about where our data is and where our cables are and where they're not. So unlike a lot of other places in the world, there seems to be a bit more of awareness about the fact that data is a thing, and it takes cables. And it's a hard thing to move around. This is actually a map of, from submarine cable maps, which shows all the undersea transmission. This is often news for some people. It might not be news for many of you here. Hi, please, that's all right, have a seat. And the reason why we kind of thought about doing this kind of project was to do with the fact that, because I said in here in Orkney, I think that there's a sense in which understanding that, we know we need cables. And rather than it being a problem, which the Digital Forum is trying to solve, is how do we turn that lived experience of knowing that, we've got to think about how we move our data around. How do we turn that into something that might be a living laboratory? Because Orkney's not alone in this. So it's about thinking through how could Orkney be a living laboratory for lots of different places in the world, these kind of edge-based places at the edge of the network, which are trying to address these issues, and how to think about it differently. So it's about saying we're not trying to solve the internet problems in Orkney, but how do we take this experience and all the solutions? I know we'll talk about it in the participatory bit, but a lot of you will have figured out workarounds or ways to get things to work, or little learnings. All that kind of stuff is things that we can then use and learn from, and think about what's the experience of internet access and how might we do it in a particular way for Orkney. Here. So that's the cloud. The Orkney cloud, and this, and brutally honestly, this is a research project because we don't know if this is actually if this is a goer. We're putting the form together because we need to kind of sit down with you and figure out what the options are. And it's really based on the simple idea that I think many of you might be familiar with the issues around the energy network in Orkney. So that's something I've been looking at for a while. I think many of you will be very familiar with it. So the kind of like the Orkney energy saga is you've got this curtailed network. We've had a smart grid for 10 years in one way or different form here in Orkney. There's a physical network limit. Sound familiar? But rather than they're kind of like everyone kind of rolling over and putting their hands in the air and saying we can't do anything about the fact there's a limit on the grid. One of the things that I've been really excited by is all the different ways. There's lots of things happening in Orkney which are about trying to kind of change and figure out our own solutions in Orkney for how we might change the energy grids. So we've got kind of micro wind turbines. There's the electric cars that are going in, the charging points. We've got Orkney surf and turf, the hydrogen stuff. So in the energy side, there's lots of little projects that don't solve the grid limit in Orkney, but they're ways of tweaking it, finding local solutions, community trust setting up, buying their own community wind turbines. There's a whole load of really interesting, very locally led ways that the grid is being tweaked in Orkney. So it struck me in a lot of conversation I was having with people, I was saying, can we do this for data? It's the same problem. We've got a physical limit in Orkney, which creates a whole set of particular experiences about moving data around the islands. Can we kind of say, it seems to me there might be an opportunity to say, actually, can we think about this in Orkney for how we might kind of find little workarounds, community solutions, local solutions, in the same way that people have found workarounds and thought out of the box for how to deal with grid. Don't know. But that's what the Orkney Cloud Forum is about. Is like, can we kind of think about ways we might do this that might work in Orkney, specific to Orkney? So rather than kind of going to a big multinational like Amazon who deliver AWS services, how do we find something that might work here locally? And that's why it's a research project. Brief slide for the techies in the audience. Very brief, we might get into this later at some point. I might invite someone to kind of give a more detailed outline. When you think about cloud services, the thing to think about is we've got a physical layer of cables, which is the stuff that the digital forum deals with. Many of you will have long conversations with BT or OpenReach about trying to get the cables. Some of you here, I know, we've got ISPs in the audience who are actually thinking about ways of delivering that service, but that's the physical layer. On top of the physical layer, you've got the applications, the software, the data. And that's the bit we're kind of thinking about in the Orkney Cloud. And what this slide is showing is different ways that the software isn't just one thing, it's layers of different bits. You've got, examples here, we've got kind of storage, the servers that basically are delivering the data. Virtualization is about how you basically distribute the data over different physical boxes. Operating systems, that's what the OS stands for. We've got different applications sitting on your operating system. So there's all these different bits. Did you know the cloud was that complicated? But this is an opportunity because we can then think about who manages what, which bits might we deliver as a service. Can we deliver some of these as an Orkney service? Or some of these do we want to outsource? So this, to me, is just a slide which is like a kind of question. Which bits have we got at the moment? Which bits do we want to manage locally? What might we do? What have we already got? I'm constantly finding people who go, yeah, we do this bit. So that's why I've got, again, this kind of question, what does Orkney look like if it was delivered as a service? So that's kind of ways of thinking about, what the cloud might be. We will come back to this in due course throughout the forum to understand a little bit more about the cloud. My high-speed slides. How am I doing for time? Almost there. Right. So the important bit is what is it we're hoping to do? This is how I make sure I get through my list properly. What we're trying to set up is this basically a discussion forum. So it's kind of like this question of how might we think about what the future might be for cloud, for data services, what on earth might that look like? What are the options? What, it could absolutely anything from thinking about the physical layer to the software to, someone said to me, do we kind of create a special Orkney browser? Do we create kind of like Google Doc for Orkney? It might be, don't know what it might be. But that's the first thing, to create forums so we can have the discussion and get people who are in Orkney who are experts at this, which many of you are, who have ideas, which many of you do, and have this conversation. Because as far as I'm aware, this is not a conversation that many of us have had before. The second thing is we want to be locally led. So Duncan, myself are trying to coordinate to try and help people get together. But this is the idea, we're asking for your participation in a way because we're providing an opportunity for you to talk together. And you can all run away and say, no, we don't want to talk. And that's entirely your prerogative, but we think it might be interesting to keep talking. The third thing we want to do is to, as we think about it, is try and help, sort of provide a socket. Because I'm at an IT university in Copenhagen, I had an opportunity to use my kind of hat as a university academic to bring companies like Mozilla and Microsoft, all the rest of it, and to get them excited by what's happening in Orkney. And there's a lot of companies who are really excited by this project. People like Broadcom, people kind of like Salesforce, they're kind of going, we get this. There's something going on in Orkney we're interested in. So can we then use, basically, to what extent can we use this project to then go, well, then you need to talk to, and then we can point them on to other people or organisations in Orkney. So it becomes a socket. So large companies might come to Orkney Cloud, and then we can send them on to organisations who might have ideas around Orkney. And then finally, the thing we hope to become is actually deploy something, i.e. get kit, do something, make something happen. That's what we want to do, ultimately. We can't do it in the first year, because we've got to figure out what we want to do first, and that's going to take a while. But we want to deploy something, that's the point. And the crucial thing about that is the fact that, and this is something I feel quite strongly about, an awful lot of you are doing a huge amount of voluntary work already. I mean, the fact that you're here for me is just staggeringly amazing. That's great. But I think for me, the crucial thing is, how do we create something that can be self-sustaining and that benefits the people who are part of the forum? So it might be that we need to set up an organisation in some way that, might become a business or a charity, or we find other ways to benefit people. But the idea is that ultimately, maybe not in the first instance, but what we're trying to do is create something that's self-sustaining, that supports people in some way, that provides benefits to individuals, benefits to business, and we think really seriously about what that might look like. So it won't end up with people having to kind of spend lots of their own time for free coming to kind of forum meetings, that kind of thing. So it's a forum to kind of have a discussion, but what we're trying to do is to get to something which actually has benefits for people. That's tricky, it's an endpoint, but I think it's important to head towards. I think that's a crucial thing. And then just reaching the end, what do we hope to do this year? So the reason that we're here this year is we've got very modest hopes for this year. We start small, hopefully get big. Am I standing in front of the slides? Might be. So first thing is what we'd like to do this year. This year we've basically got some kind of like seed funding from Mozilla. Yay! They gave us a little bit of money for setting the forum up, a little bit of money to get us going. And what we want to do is come up with some ideas of what features we might do. If we could do anything in Orkney to kind of deliver and think about how we move data around the islands, how we might share data, how we might run some kind of cloud services, what can we do that benefits the islands, what do we want to do, what's possible, what's easy to do in the first instance, come up with those ideas. Think about, secondly, some options for deployment. If we were going to do something, actually, put some kit in or set up some services, what would we do in the first instance? Like a little research project, we'd get some research funding from somewhere and try a little deployment. A few organisations or a few islands involved as a stage one, and then scaling up. What could we do to get those options on the table? Because then we can actually make it happen. That's what we're hoping to do this year, is get those options, and then we're going to deliver this through a magazine. So rather than writing a dry technical report, which nobody will read, what we were thinking of doing is basically creating a magazine, which includes technical discussions, and those who are members of the forum will be invited to contribute, to maybe write articles in the magazine, to present the range of options. So everyone takes ownership and has a chance to write something, and it also includes some sort of creative pieces, some imaginative pieces of what the future of Orkney Cloud might look like. The idea is it's not just for us in the forum, but that can then travel around the world, not just to people in Mozilla, but other edge locations. So it's, as I said, Orkney is a living laboratory to kind of share its ideas for what it might look like in the future. So that's what we're hoping to do this year. Like I said, modest, simple, figure out what we might do. And then if we kind of decide that this is not a direction we want to go in, then we deliver the magazine and it's a win, it's all good. But hopefully we can do slightly more. To be really clear, we are not the Orkney Digital Forum. This means that if your burning issue is about the fact that BT or Openreach haven't managed to deliver X number of megabits, we feel for you, but go talk to the Orkney Digital Forum, because they're the ones who are taking this on. So that's not, we're not doing their work, and we're really glad they exist, but that's what they're doing. The other thing we're doing is we're not kind of trying to set up an ISP, an internet service provider, right? That there are ISPs in Orkney and we support them, but that's not what we are either. So if you're wanting to purchase a service from them, we're not selling services. It might happen down the future, but we're not. That's not what we're doing. So just to be clear, no confusion. And that pretty much was the brief run through of what we're hoping to do, what we're hoping to do in the future, where we are now, a little bit about what we're not. I'm a bit late, not too bad. Cool. So questions? We'll sit down at this point.
Yeah, so Laura's going to answer the question because she's got the technical knowledge. So if anyone's got any questions about what Laura just said, I will facilitate those, but I'll also keep my eye on the YouTube because we have got 3 people watching now, so we'll I'll type in a bit of a question there for people to see if they want to ask anything, but while I'm doing that, if people in the room want to ask Laura anything, feel free.
Please ask questions. If you have a question, I guarantee someone else probably has a similar question.
Let's start then.
Please.
Right, big data.
Yep.
We know that there's a lot of big data around it. But for the forum and gathering data here locally, what I would think we would struggle to do is actually be able to have the likes of maybe Kenny from the council tapping into that data or actually utilising that data because of the kind of interactions and the interfaces and the security that's going to be surrounding it. That's kind of going to be a bit hard, I think, that we're going to struggle with.
Yeah, so I think that's in a way something like a theme that we need to talk about. So that's issues around GDPR, presumably those kinds of issues, you mean, and also issues about data interaction, how we manage data.
Yeah, yes, it's common to NHS Council, the whole kind of thing.
Yes.
Sharing the data is good, but they don't want to do it.
Yes. But so I think that's something which is, I agree, let's put that on the table for discussion. The reason I'm saying it's not, I don't think it's closed is that I handily work at an IT university and we have a whole bunch of people who are asking just this kind of question. So I think, for me, I agree, but how might, for the council and NHS, also lots of organisations, if you're going to basically distribute your data around or share a bit of processing or storage, how do we do that in a secure way? Otherwise, we can't do it at all. So, and that's why we're plugged into people like Mozilla. So can we basically pull on some of that expertise, bring that expertise to Orkney so we can kind of deliver that or share that in some way? I don't know, is that expertise you have in? Anyone around the table get expertise in that? Just checking before I kind of say, let's bring in someone else, because it might be someone, we'll see. Okay, yep. So yes, I agree we need to do that, and I don't have any immediate answers because it's tricky. Yeah.
I'll just follow up.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, really great. Thanks for the question. Yeah, certainly I would agree from what Greg says, these are some of the hurdles that you have to overcome here.
Yeah.
But when you look at it from a different point of view, with Orkney the brand, Orkney has a brand of excellence in terms of its food production, in terms of the quality of craftsmanship in some of the non-technical industries that we have here. And that really comes from a really great innovative mindset that exists, and actually Greg and these organisations part of the latest version of that in terms of what they're trying to do with TV white space and connectivity here.
Yeah.
To fill a gap. And therefore, I think that while, yes, this wouldn't be a success if you're just trying to compete with Microsoft or Azure or Amazon.
Yeah.
But there's issues of locality and quality that we can fulfill here that I think we can support it across the board, because actually that's where the real seam that you can tap into exists.
Cool. I'll take that as a kind of like a quiet enthusiasm kind of.
Yeah, I would certainly from my point of view in council office, I wouldn't be in a position to involve in council data into Orkney tomorrow. Yeah. But it's a journey that we want to support with, and obviously to provide good experience and knowledge and reference as we can on that basis. So very much it's an interesting step that everyone's taking.
Thank you, Kenny.
Laura, if we go on, just one point on YouTube here. So could you give them a summary to the people on YouTube about the question being asked? I'm guessing they can't quite hear very well from the back of the room. Questions are being asked from elsewhere. Before you answer, you could maybe summarize.
I'll do that. So we had a question about sharing and how do we kind of share data given GDPR and big data issues, how to stop interactions between data across databases. And then we had a second comment from Kenny in the council saying generally sort of supportive, kind of like, you know, what's the kind of the edge that we have, so to speak, is the locality we have in Orkney and how that ties, how this might tie into Orkney brand excellence. Is that a reasonable brief summary?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Right. So you're fielding questions, sorry.
Just scribbling down some very kind of observations that link very closely to your comments that there needs to be some sort of value created. I mean, it might be, you know, sort of commercial, you know, sort of cheaper services or better, more resilient services, or other kinds of values where maybe there's a getting down pride and place, so that people in Orkney want to know that their data isn't on. But the more of those people take care of it, it's just, you know, a big list or something. Or this idea of the fact that there's a lot of cloud inputs associated with that work, or being like really more value to somebody on the outside that wants to use that. But it strikes me that without that sense of value, I don't mean necessarily permanence, then there's no purpose, and that's what we need to kind of find. I mean, there are technical issues, sure, but that need to be overcome, but unless there's some sort of value for us or somebody, that's a use also sense of then they work out. And that's what we need to be in.
So just to summarise that for, thank you, for those online, it's kind of a question about what the value might be of what we're doing. And it doesn't have to be kind of financial value. So I would say that maybe there's two things, and we can, you know, pick this up in a wide discussion, but two things that strike me. One is obviously what might be the value for people in Orkney, and different organisations and people might have different values. But then there's a second value for me, which is when I'm thinking about, say, Mozilla. Thank you for joining us, Kenny. And have you signed up? Brilliant, thank you. But the second issue is like the value, as I said, is a living laboratory for both organisations, communities outside the islands who are kind of interested in the things that we're thinking about, the solutions that come up with here, that they might go, okay, we could do something similar elsewhere. That's why the reason Mozilla's funded this, is they're kind of interested to see what we might come up with.
That was a question I had, and I apologize for coming in late. Elaine Buck with EMAC. Is there anything else in the world that is something, a community-led cloud group or organization that's delivered a community-led cloud group or service or whatever it's going to end up being? Is there other examples in the world? Or is this the first? I mean, I might have missed I didn't come in at the very beginning. You might have already covered that.
No, I was looking around just check if someone had an immediate.
I think we do. Because we were working a couple of years back with Microsoft in particular, and who had a big interest in Orkney doing exactly the same type of scope.
Okay.
But they do a lot more, they're involved in more about delivering technology to rural areas, but they were more focusing in Africa, because the data that they could glean from their clustered servers in Africa is actually very valuable to them. So they're all doing it anyway.
Okay.
But here, they were trying to do it, but not.
So I would say also in terms of other places that might be doing it, as you say, there's been a lot of interest in Africa, but I was also thinking about, there's a kind of a history to thinking through kind of bottom-up networking. One of the people on our project who's also going to be helping us, a colleague of mine, Sebastian Bushwick, he originally comes out of Berlin, and then his experience in setting up kind of Wi-Fi, open source community community network. So in sort of cities or places where people live a little bit closer together, he's got experience of how you might basically create a free network for delivering service, but using kind of Wi-Fi routers. And that's got a long kind of history to it. So there's kind of different versions, I think. There's different versions of it, but so we're not. I don't think it's about being first, but I think it's about there's something about maybe what we might come up with in Orkney that might be something that no one's thought of before.
Anyone else? Any questions?
One of the things that's kind of been, I guess, going through my mind for quite some time is obviously the geographical position of where Orkney is relative to what you were saying before about how data centers are basically an exercise in how cheap can you get electricity. And obviously Orkney kind of has cheap electricity, but we know how to do that to some extent. And maybe kind of a question to the kind of group. To what extent do you think that there's something about having a zero carbon footprint spin on the Orkney cloud?
Can you just speak up slightly? Thanks.
If we can't export electricity on generating, can we export data services?
So I think it's one thing just to bear in mind, just based on your point, because I've been asking exactly the same question. I've been, as an academic, beavering away, looking at some of the issues, and some of you may be already familiar with this. But the data industry is not so much about the zero carbon footprint, but they have this kind of measure called PUE, which is their usage efficiency, power usage efficiency. So that point about whether we might think about using, or the relationship between renewable energy and data is an important one. And that for me is something that'd be quite exciting to do. So that might be something we're going to talk about if we get do some data processing here in Orkney in some ways, and then get it off the island. Get it off the islands. That's slightly different from doing a cloud service within Orkney, but could be quite exciting. Sorry.
Mining bitcoins.
Yes.
Do we know the power consumption of these data centers? So what's the footprint? How many acres to megawatts?
So that's, does anyone have any immediate, that stuff so you can look up online. The issue is how big's your data center? And that will be kind of figuring out a business proposition to someone and what that might look like.
I guess what I'm trying to say here, Orkney needs to share megawatts of power. How many acres is that? Is it just too big on a data center? So in other words, if you cover a size obviously a data center, does that reach the power requirement? In other words, is that real objective? Have you got the metrics?
Okay, so just to be clear, the discussion about whether we might have data centers in Orkney is one little piece of what this might be. Yeah.
But it just has to follow up from this point.
Yeah.
If you're looking at consuming energy, if that's a goal, then we just need to frame that correctly, because if you're talking about a massive data center to get megawatts, then it may just be too big for the landmass.
Yeah.
You're better off in the desert.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
The solar panels.
I think that's an important discussion to have.
It's, I don't have the answer to that, but I noticed there was a piece of news recently, a bit nice one, almost at a point where mining cryptocurrencies using as much energy as the entire domestic population. So it can be really large amounts.
Yeah, no, but it's a footprint, I guess we say. It's related to physical footprint to the energy consumption.
Yeah, so we could look that up.
Yeah, I think that's important to get, because you're not going to get planning permission for a massive, but taking over a whole island, there's no point.
So that might be one, yeah.
It's
so
a screen. It's a screen. If it's doable, then it should be considered. or dog in the head.
So we'll put that one. So just to summarise we've got Andy. Hi, Andy. Andy Macon, who's from Westry, who's listening in. Just to say one thing, we're talking about what will be the power usage of a sort of per acre, so to speak, or half acre, whatever, of putting a data centre in Orkney. And that might be one solution, but also remembering that we could also be looking at distributed solutions. So the people I work with at the university are interested in, rather than just having, saying, hey, Google, come land a big data center here, which is one thing, but can we think about distributing a data center through distributed processing? So there doesn't have to be a direct relationship between where your physical processing is done and what it looks like to a software application. So if you remember when you're, I'm going to show my age a bit here. Remember Napster, anyone? Yeah, so we used to have these, and also screensavers. NASA had a screensaver where you would basically run your screensaver, and it would run a little bit of processing on your computer to kind of like try and identify, I forgot what it is now, but probably some pulsar or something like that.
Oh, that's SETI.
There was SETI as well. That was SETI, but there was a NASA one as well. We had this debate. I remember SETI because I was on the SETI one as well. So you could kind of like use your computer, kind of look for kind of like extraterrestrial intelligence. Okay, that may have been a bit geeky.
Processing speed, or that's remotely distributed. Obviously, you tie into that bandwidth.
Exactly. That's another issue.
To get that information.
Yeah. So I was just wondering if we should do a quick pause here at this point and run into kind of like, we're sort of blurring into the second part of the discussion, which is a good thing. But I just wondered if that would be a good moment to do that.
Take a quick break, yeah.
Just, do you want to ask if Andy's got any questions?
Yeah, I was going to say, if anyone on the YouTube channel there has got a few questions for Laura, then feel free to ask quickly now. But otherwise, we'll take a couple of minutes break. And
do we want to keep breaking? Because I'm wondering if we're going to finish.
We might finish in time. Well, let people take a comfort break maybe if they need it, but then we'll break into the forum session for those that want to stay behind for that, which I'm assuming and hoping is probably everyone in the room anyway. So
yes, just take 2 minutes just so we can switch over technology, because we're going to basically load up the forum and show what it is, and then we can take the things that we're talking about and turn them into kind of themes for discussion. So that's what we're going to do next. Is we're already sort of thinking about what might we actually want to have extended discussions about and figure out what they might be. But we're aware, because we're going to run on for another hour, that some of you might want to nip out for just 2 minutes. So we're going to do that. Have we got any discussion? No? Okay, Andy.
I'll just say to those online, if anyone wants to take part in the forum bit next, we're going to transfer to Skype. So can you email me through your Skype details if you haven't done already?
Yes.
Bro. Okay.
Okay, cool. So 2 minutes, we're just going to switch over our technology, feel to stretch your legs. And then we're going to load up the forum so you can kind of see what this thing looks like in practice. Just 2 minutes, and yes, feel free to nip away if you've got to dash off, but hopefully you can stay.